What's up, everybody, and welcome to Loop Live. My name is Matt McCoy. I'm the founder of loopcommunity.com and the host of the Loop Live show. Today, we have a very special guest. He's been here before. You maybe have heard of him, Patrick Mayberry. Really excited to talk with Patrick today. So, he and I both lived in Chicago for a while, both worship leaders of churches. And today, we're going to actually get into a very practical conversation that I selfishly actually want to talk about because it's an issue that I'm currently dealing with myself as a worship leader. And that is how to build a worship team, a worship band at your church from scratch. We're going to just talk about tips about how to actually find volunteers, how to get them scheduled. We're going to get like very practical in some sense. So I know that this probably applies to a lot of worship leaders trying to just build your teams at church. And it can be a challenge. So we're going to talk about all those things. If you guys have any questions while we're talking, type them into the chats wherever you're watching from, and we'll try to answer some questions live if we can. And also, if you have not done so already, make sure you like or subscribe wherever you're watching this to be updated on any other Loop Live events. So without further ado, let's go and get started with this interview with Patrick Mayberry. Mr. Patrick,
Yeah!
what's up, man?
Fury punches.
Woo! Good to see you, man. It's been a while.
So good to see you.
Always good to have you on the Loop Live show. You were here last time, and some of our best content came from that interview. So I'm
Oh,
excited
get
about
out
this
of
one.
town. You
So
look you look extra ruggedly handsome.
I'm growing it out a little bit. But see all this gray? This is
Hey,
the more children you have, the more gray just appears
that's
magically somehow.
that's wisdom, man.
So Mr. Patrick, you're looking at yourself. I want to selfishly get into a conversation with you uh, that's related to an issue that I'm even dealing with personally right now as a worship leader. So let me give you a little bit of background. There's a brand new church plant in our town.
Love it.
There's about 50 to 100 people that show up every single Sunday. We set up every single week in a community center. So it's like total mobile church. Right now, it's just me on an acoustic guitar leading worship with there's a guy who plays keys. We've got a Nord and he sits there, he plays keys, and then we've got a vocalist.
Yes.
But that is it. That's all we've got. And we've been using tracks to kind of help just kind of fill out the sound. Sometimes we actually use full band tracks. And believe it or not, I thought it would be kind of goofy doing that, but it actually totally works and people love it. Like it works. But most of the time we're using like electronic elements, like just kind of beats and shakers and pads, that kind
Right.
of thing. Anyways, the pastor of the church came to me and said, we really want to build a worship band here. Like we want to have drums and bass and electric guitar. And I was like, I'll help out with that. Now, I'm finding though, I'm now a week or two into it, and I'm like, this is maybe going to be challenging. And
Yes.
how do you find people to actually play? I've been like texting friends that I know, in the area, but even that is not totally working. And so we're going to talk about, because I know you've done this before. You were with Soul City, when they first started early on. You've built a worship team, worship bands. And so I want to just have a conversation, just worship leader to worship leader. Give us tips on how to build a worship band at your church. All right. So the first question is like, when building a worship team, how do you actually find people for that team?
Yeah. Yeah.
Any tips you got
Well,
us for us on that one?
yeah, I'm speechless. No, I'm kidding. That is such a challenge. It can be. I will say, I thought being, Soul City is like kind of in like a very urban downtown part of Chicago. I thought like that location would be like prime for like hip young musicians, and that couldn't have been further from the truth. So I will say, first off, to anyone who is well, to you and to anyone who is in the scenario, like your location, I don't think has anything to do with it. I think some of the most like you don't need to be near a big city. You could be in the smallest city in the world. I think it's funny, like, I've never been to Redding, California, but
Yeah.
Bethel is located in Redding, and they say Redding is Bethel. They say it is the smallest, weirdest town, uh, and Bethel is there. And so actually learning that, like, helped me so much to think, oh, you don't need this metropolis magical city to
Right.
like have an awesome band.
Right.
So I remember in the early days of Soul City, we definitely. I love what you just said, that you have a keys player and you're playing on acoustic and you have a vocalist. I think being like knowing where you are and being able to like be like, this is where we are. Like, we have a the pastor's 18-year-old son can play the cajon,
Yep.
and I can play guitar, and by golly, we're gonna like crush it every week.
Yep.
And not getting like down on yourself that you don't have the most rock and roll 10-piece band in town yet, but
Yeah.
like knowing that like God has you right where you are in that season, and like crush it, like
Yeah.
rehearse just as much as you would with full band. And I found that good like good attracts good. And
Mhm.
so you kind of have to play the patient game a little bit, in the sense of like, well, we're going to steward what God has put right in front of us with the people he's put right in front of us. And we're going to try week in and week out to create very intentional, very spirit dependent worship as best as we can with what we have. And I think that part of it is a time game. Like, word's going to get out, like, oh, there's this new church in town and I'm going to go check it out because it's cool. Or, and then you have some awesome drummer who shows up who loves worship drums and loves drumming, and he's like, hey, I see you guys don't have a drummer. I'd love to get involved. And so having a lot of patience and being content with where you are
Mhm.
is the first key. Um, so I can remember back in the like early Soul City days, I would like have the funniest, like just the funniest ideas. Like I would pray a lot. I think that's a big ticket. Like,
Yeah.
if you need a drummer, like start praying for a drummer. And then be ready, like be eyes open. Like, you might meet that drummer at the UPS store because he's a UPS driver, but because you stopped and talked to him and got to know him, you actually found out he's the ex drummer for Motley Crue. It's Tommy Lee. You find
Yeah.
out it's Tommy
Yeah.
Lee, and you're
Yeah.
like, well, Tommy, I've got this church that you need to come to. And he's like, I'd love to come. um, and I feel like God is really faithful when you can specifically ask for things, and like, we really need, whatever the position is,
Yeah.
like, and asking God for that. But I used to get so like funny. I would like stalk, like, I don't feel like maybe they're still as prevalent, but I feel like Facebook, like guitar player groups
Yeah.
were a really hot thing like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I would get on these Facebook groups and just be like, "Hey, what's up? Any guitar players in the Chicago area? I'd love to buy you coffee."
Yeah.
And one of our best guitarists who played with us for probably 4 years, I met him through a Facebook group, and we randomly met at a coffee shop. And it's so funny because years later, I overheard him telling someone how he met me, and he was totally weirded out by it. Like, he was like, "Yeah, Patrick just kind of reached out to me randomly on Facebook and asked me to go get coffee because he knew that I played guitar."
Yeah.
And he was kind of like, "I'm so glad he did." And so,
Yeah. That's a great idea.
um, I used to, and stop me at any time, but I'm just rattling off a bunch of stuff. I remember I used to, while I was leading worship, I would try to like look out in the crowd and see who was, like, really
Who's
engaging with
who's
worship.
air drumming?
Yeah, or
Yeah,
who was just, like, going for it and who
yeah.
was singing, and I actually remember one Sunday, there was a family that was, out this was probably a year or so of me being at Soul City. There was a family, and I noticed this guy who was just singing, like, just singing, singing, singing,
Mhm.
and as soon as service was over, I remember putting my guitar down and beelining it out to the lobby to, like, stake my post and be like, "All right, where's this guy? I'm gonna find him." And then I saw him, and I was like, "Hey, dude, you look like you're a worshiper." And he was like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Totally, like, saw you, and you seem to really be worshiping." And, um, he's actually one of my best friends now. Is a guy named Jeremy Lopez, and
Yeah,
he is a killer worship leader and actually
yeah,
started
he's awesome.
leading worship with us at Soul City, and then actually eventually came on staff. And to this day, I mean, almost 8, 9 years ago is when I met him, and now he leads at Soul City every 2 weeks.
It's
And
awesome.
so it that was just a funny story, but I used to stand
Yeah,
out in the lobby, and if someone kinda looked like they might play music, I would just go up to them. I would usually take a friend with me so I didn't seem like a weirdo,
yeah,
and I would walk up to people, and I remember doing it to a guitar player. I'm like, "Hey, man, you look like you play guitar, do you?" And he was like, "Well, actually, I do." And
yeah,
then he ended up joining our team, um, and I feel like there's I don't know how you find people.
yeah,
I think you got to get scrappy, and I think like you said, for a season it works to like lean on like outside friends,
yeah,
but it's not really sustainable, and it's not
right.
really the culture you're wanting to build of a team that's like bought into what you're doing
Yeah,
there in your local body. But I don't feel like there's any rules. I feel like you just gotta pray, and then you've kinda just gotta, like, kinda get out there and beat the streets a
yeah.
little bit, um, and
I
then
really
pray that God delivers people.
yeah. I really want people involved who are a part of the church. Like, I want it to be something that they're already there, their family's there. That's an amazing mug, by the way. Um,
This whole thing?
yeah, that um, I want it to be something that actually maybe even connects people to the church, that
Yeah,
maybe I bring people in that actually this becomes their church home because they were looking for a spot. Now, the question I'm finding is, in the beginning, in the early days when you have nobody, of course you want quality to be there, but how picky can you be? And so,
yeah,
to give you an idea, I met a guy in the lobby last week who he said, I play drums. And I was like, really? And I was like, just tell me, like, how long have you played? And he's like, oh, I've played for, 5, 10 years. And I was like, do you play to a click? And he said, yeah, I can play to a click. I'm like, you're
uh,
in. I didn't even
yeah,
do, well, no, I actually, Patrick, we'll see. I'm not sure yet. I have not done an audition with this
I
guy.
love
I
it.
scheduled him for May 22nd. He's already like in planning center and like listening to the songs and stuff, but I have no clue like if
Yes,
this guy can really play. But he said he can play to a click, and I'm thinking, you know what? I'm gonna just go for it. I have no one, and so we're gonna try it out. But that's pretty risky because it could be a disaster. Um, but we don't really have a rehearsal space. I can't do auditions. I mean, I guess
sure.
he could send me a video or something maybe, but I don't
I
know.
kinda I kinda love that you're doing that because it's gonna be fine. Let's say it
Yeah,
completely bombs,
right.
and he's literally the worst drummer in the world.
Yeah,
Everything's gonna be fine,
I know.
and I bet your pastor is still gonna preach the gospel, and
Yeah.
I bet, like, it might be a little distracting, but you'll figure it out the next Sunday, and I think that is something, like, we found in the early days of Soul City, there was no good space for people to fail. And
Mhm.
it's like Sunday morning was like this mecca Super Bowl, which it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's fine. We want to take serious what we do, but you're gonna be fine. Like, so I
Yeah.
love that you're just like taking the risk and you're like, let's do it. It's not like
Yeah.
you can do that. Like, you might want to rethink that when your church is larger, but maybe not. Maybe you should
Right.
keep that mentality of like
Yeah.
it's not the end all be all. Like, I don't know. I love
That's what I
that.
was thinking. Cause and what I love too is that this guy, he's been there since the church opened, a couple months ago. He's there every single week. Like it's his
Yeah.
church. And I'm like, well, why not get him involved if he can
Yeah.
play drums? There's another guy who I talked to who said he plays guitar, but I
Yes.
can't really figure out if he plays like acoustic or electric or like what type of guitar. You know, I think he's just played guitar for like 30 years. And I'm like, hey, join us, come play. Because
I
I
love
think
it.
like at least like he's up there with us, but you do kind of have to take a risk. What, so once you actually maybe find people, how do you actually schedule them? Like,
Oh
are you
Lord.
scheduling them? Like, how often are you scheduling them? Um,
Yeah.
because I feel like I'm gonna constantly be in planning center. Like, do you think it's something that I can actually plan out like a quarter ahead? Or what are some
That
tips on
that
that?
I think that is very like I don't think there's a right answer. I think it's very like how well do you know your people? What works for your people? Because I found that sometimes scheduling a quarter out, people don't want to commit that far. They're
Hmm.
like, I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 2 months. Are you crazy? I might
Yeah,
be on vacation, or
yeah,
there might be a festival that comes up and I want to go to that. So there's ebbs and flows with that. And I think it's, you know, when I was kind of overseeing that at Soul City, we did it monthly, and that was as
hmm,
far out as we got because we felt like any further, we just couldn't get people to commit.
yeah,
And we would ask people like we would try to do all that we could, like, hey, tell us your availability, and then we're going to work our best around it, and then we're going to send it out for the month, and we would love for you to either confirm or decline like within like 24 hours, just so it doesn't
yeah,
sit idle, and then the week prior we're like, oh man, he said
yeah,
no, so we won't have this position, or she said no. um and for us, we in those early days especially, we I ask people to serve at a minimum once a month, but I felt like I wanted people who could at least serve twice a month
hmm,
for what we were trying to build and what we were trying to do. I feel like with consistency and like, it is so tricky to play. Maybe you were together on Sunday morning, you do rehearsals, you do a service, maybe you do two
yeah,
services, and then by the end of the day, you're like, okay, we actually like put this thing together and it started to
yeah,
feel really good. And then you're like,
yeah,
all right, guys, I'll see you in 2 months. And then we'll start this whole process over again. But we
yeah,
just found like, obviously, like finding what works for the people, but also like kind of saying, like, hey, here's what we would really love to see. Like, could you commit 2 times a month for a quarter? And then let's reevaluate. And if it's not working for you, because then they'll be like, okay, I can play 6 times over the next 3 months. I'm in. Let's do it. We're building a thing. And I feel like with everything, like if you're leading with vision about like, you know, I don't want you to just play guitar here. I don't want you to just sing here. I want you to help shape what the worship culture feels like at this church as we're building this thing. Like,
yeah,
sky's the limit. And that's what people want to be a part of. They want to be a part of a family and a culture. They don't want to
yeah,
just show up and play some stupid riffs and then go
yeah,
home. They
yeah.
want to
They want
belong.
community. Yeah.
Yeah,
We have a live question from Kevin King. All right.
love
So
it.
Kevin asks, we're doing online auditions and getting no response. What's your recommendation for the audition process?
On is that like? They have like a website and people like submit stuff.
It sounds like maybe they're having people upload videos,
Yeah.
but no one's doing it.
I mean,
Gosh,
honestly, I
I would
I
almost
wouldn't.
say go back in person, do real
Yeah, go
live
back in
auditions, right?
person. I don't know that I would wanna do an online edition.
Yeah,
Like, personally, like, if I were at a church, I would be too scared. I would be
yeah,
too intimidated. I
yeah,
would overthink it. I would be like, "Okay,
yeah,
an audition on acoustic and vocals. So, should I tune my vocal? Should I record it in my microphone? Should I
yeah.
just do it on my iPhone? What song?" Like, and we actually did that for a while at Soul City, and we got a few, but it's few and far between. So I would say, um, call me crazy, and I don't know what your capacity is, but maybe start with the first line of defense being like, "Let's go get a cup of coffee." And it could
Mhm.
be a quick meeting. It could be like, "Hey, meet me for coffee for 30 minutes," and
Yeah.
get to know the person, because I've found time and time again, I would much rather have a killer character, chemistry, synced person who's a mediocre player or singer, because we can work on that. Like, we can I can buy them a Dr. Beat and send them home and say, "Hey, play drums to this metronome for 30 minutes a day, every day for the next 5 weeks." And or, "Hey, your pitch is a little flat on those notes. You should like try this." But like, you can teach those little things so much easier than you can like
Hmm.
culture and integrity and being on time. Like, and
Yeah.
there was a person on our team who was just dynamite, and we were just better when they were there, and they were kind of mediocre at what they did, but everyone felt it when they were in the green room, when they were on stage. Everyone was freer, and
Hmm.
they were a culture shaper. And so, yeah, maybe the online edition or audition is like, take a break for a minute and
Yeah. Try something
say,
else.
and again, I get that that's a tricky capacity thing, but it's like, interested in joining the worship team?
Mm.
Let's go get a cup of coffee. And then if you really like them, and I feel like when you talk to people, you can get a sense of like,
Yeah,
okay,
you
I
can.
think this person knows what they're talking about, or you learn their motives too, and like, you just
Hmm.
learn maybe their spouse's name or something like that, and then, and I get it, that's way more personal, and it's way harder to say no to somebody once you realize they can't play their instrument at all, and you're like, "Ugh, dang
Yeah.
it, you're a great guy, but you're not good, like, this isn't gonna
Yeah.
help us." And
Yeah.
you have to maybe have a harder conversation. I feel like that's a little dicier, but I think it's worth
Yeah.
it for building the culture that you and that I think other people would want to be a part of.
I couldn't agree more with that, Patrick. It's amazing how much you can tell from someone when you just talk to them for even like 10 minutes. You can really get to know whether they know what they're talking about, which is kind of why I accepted that drummer because he mentioned some things that I'm like, okay, this guy's like done this before.
Yeah.
He's not completely coming in out of the dark. And I do agree too that online editions would scare me because I would wonder, first of all, you're right. I would be overthinking about the video. Do I need to redo it 10 times? Do I need to add effects? And also, I'd wonder where the video is going to end up. I don't know
Right.
if I don't know. It would make me very uncomfortable. So that's a really great question though. Thank you, Kevin. Um,
Yeah.
oh, we have another live question. Josh Lawless. He says, at times I have to bring in musicians and monetarily compensate because of shortages. What are your views on compensating musicians? Oh, that's an interesting one. And I'm at a church where we can't even compensate anybody. So,
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I totally get that. We've been there. And it gets like kind of squirrely because it's like you'll bring in a ringer because okay, it's like, oh, we need a keys player because our keys position usually runs the tracks, and just a lot of what we do is very dependent on keys. And so, when we wouldn't have a dynamite keys player, we would bring in somebody, and it's so tricky because it's like they're an outside person and they're doing us a favor, and so we're compensating them like not much, but just honoring them for like jumping in. But then I have other people who are literally working 50 hours a week, crushing their jobs, raising their families, and they're the most devoted volunteers.
Hmm.
And I don't even think they would take money if you offered it to them. They're like, "No, this is my church. I love this." And I don't know how all that sorts out. That's where it gets weird
Yeah.
for me. Is it's like I get there are instances when sometimes you just have to just to do it, but at the same time, it's like I don't know. I'm gonna probably turn the conversation upside down, but I think it's almost we're getting the cart before the horse a little bit in those because we're putting this standard stamp of approval on what our worship experience should be
Hmm.
over caring for the people who are most devoted
Yeah.
to the cause and to the thing. And it's like, well, is that what we want to be about? Maybe. And maybe that's fine. I'm not saying it's bad, but I think that's a great question. And the fact that you're asking it means that you're probably sensitive to it. And so just stay super sensitive to it and pray and ask God about it. And
Hmm.
if it ever starts feeling really wonky and weird, then just start paying everybody or don't pay
Yeah.
anybody. We still are like Soul City is a volunteer. It's a volunteer squad.
Yeah. To flip the coin on it, from my perspective, at a small church plant where we can't pay for anyone, it's hard to compete with churches who do pay. And
Uh,
there was a guy I even asked, I was like, hey man, could you come in and play drums for us, for this Easter Sunday? And he was like, well, how much do you pay? And I'm like, we can't pay anything. This would just be a volunteer thing. And, he was like, no. And I was like, that's fine. Because I know that he probably does that for other churches. And
mhm.
that is a sticky situation and it can get complicated. Um, so I have a question for you. When you have volunteers, do you typically create bands that stick together or do you mix and match when you're scheduling people?
Yeah. So I remember when I first got to Soul City, they had two bands, and I was like, that's not fun. Like, but I've learned for me, variety is the spice of life.
Yeah,
And so we always mixed it up. There was
mix everyone
like,
around.
and the way it worked is there wasn't an A band and a B band. There wasn't, well, let's bring in the A guys. Let's bring in, that's the B band. It was so intermixed. And what's cool about that is you might have a really, really, really strong drummer, and then you're able to offset like, well, I've got really strong drummer, and he's going to come in and influence this bass player, and
Hmm.
then that bass player is going to be able to go next week and influence this other guy in on that given week.
Yeah,
And I feel like it builds
yeah.
a little bit better, like just chemistry within the whole team versus
Hmm.
like I never see that guy because he plays in the other band, or I never see that girl
Yeah,
because she plays in the other band. But
yeah.
mixing and matching, and I feel like people, I don't know, I feel like people get energized with new energy, and it's like, who am I playing with this week? Oh, okay.
Hmm.
And we were strategic. You, I think you might have stronger players. Like this drummer is a stronger drummer than this drummer, so maybe we would be intentional to like if we kind of had it listed out in our heads, like, okay, these are our absolute best players across the board. So how do we make sure we have at least two of those on a
Mm,
Sunday so it doesn't feel, and you kind of learn, like, you learn your people who like invigorate you as a worship leader and free you up as a worship leader, and then you learn the people that you kind of just have to make sure you're shepherding your that, some people a little more than others.
yeah,
um does that make sense?
totally. Yeah. So, one more practical question, then we're gonna jump to another one online. How do you keep people responsive to planning center emails or blocking out their dates so you're not constantly hunting them down? Hey, man, can you play? Can you play? Because I know it's nice to be able to kind of send out those planning center invites, but if people aren't responsive to them, then you're hunting them down via text message or phone.
Mhm.
Do you have any tips on how to get people to actually use Planning Center?
Yeah, kinda. I think it's again, it's a culture building thing, but like almost making it a thing that people can expect. Like, okay, like you have to do your due diligence to let people know, like, okay, I'm taking this serious. So I'd love for you to take it serious. I'm going to do all that I can do to plan for you, but at the end of the day, like, I need you to like be responsible. So for instance, like if it's a monthly thing or a quarterly thing, um, like have a day where it's like we would schedule for a month, typically 1 month out.
Hmm.
So people had, 3 to 4 weeks before that scheduled month. And it was
Songs
like,
as well?
oh, no, 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 no. Songs, that's like the, the Monday before that Sunday. And
Yeah,
that's like that's doing great. No
yeah,
way. This is more just like confirming that we actually have a person in that position.
yep,
Um, and it's almost like you might send out like an email or text, like, guys, like, text group texts are just as effective as emails these days, and they're actually better because some people hate them because they're like, why's my phone blowing up? Those people are grouchy and they need to like have friends in their life. Um, but I think group texts are fun, like, especially to like just razz people and like, because people start, you know, you're like, hey, I'm doing planning center. Let me know your availabilities. And then all of a sudden it goes off on some GIF, parade that people are sending thousands of GIFs or whatever. But I think letting people know, hey, we're about to put planning center together. I would
yep,
love to know your availability. And then people send their availabilities, and then you put together this schedule that you've worked on, and you're like, okay, I've thought through. I want this drummer. I think he'll really complement this guitar player. I think this singer will really do that, and blah, 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 blah. And then you just blast it out. You send those 4 weeks. Here they are. And in theory, everyone, if their availability, like if they like thought through that, they're like, okay, I'm all in. I'm good to go. But we just ask people to not let it sit idle. We're like, help me help you help me. Like, don't
right,
let it sit idle. Just say, if you can't do it, just say no, I can't do it. And that way the scheduler can like move on and be like, okay, he's out that week. I'm not going to count on him, or she can't do it. So let's go on and find someone else, because we found that to be really hard. Like, people would get scheduled and it would just sit idle. And then weeks would come on and it'd get closer and closer and it's still idle. And then if you're not watching it, which no one wants to play planning center police, but then you notice it's the week of and that position's still idle, and you text them and you're like, hey, are you on for that date? And they're like, oh, sorry, man, I can't do it. And you're like, I quit. I quit my job. And then
Yep.
scrounging. And I remember in the early days of Soul City getting your name, Matt, and I would literally text you in this exact scenario and be like, Matt, do you know any drummers in this town? Like, I don't
I
know
remember
any.
that.
I need you to send me drummers' names because
Yep.
Joker here sat idle forever and then declined the day before or something.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's okay to put responsibility on people to be like, if and say that on the front end, like, hey, here's kind of how we do it. Like,
Yeah.
send the planning center requests out a month out, and I just ask that you respond in 24 hours or,
Yeah.
36 hours, whatever works. Like,
Right.
that way I can know if you're in or out. And if you're out, not a big deal. We'll figure out another week. But
Yeah.
just, it doesn't serve the system well if people just don't respond.
Yep. Set the culture, explain the why. Like, why do we use
Yeah,
planning
yeah,
center? Why is it
yeah,
important that you respond? All right,
yeah.
we have another live question. This is from Joseph Vaughn. He
Mm.
says, how would you go about working with people that can do the part but have a questionable heart? And that rhymed.
Oh, I like that. Working with, I want to say it like a pastor would say it. How would you go with working with people that can do the part with a questionable heart? Um, Man, uh, I would I would just love them, and those people need to be a part of our teams. Um, and and I think it requires you just to pastor people. It requires you to make it a point. Like, if it's your thing that you're stewarding and have been entrusted with, I think some of the best musicians and some of the most creative artists would have a questionable heart. Um, and so I think if you're willing to like walk alongside those people, like bring them on all day because you're going to be better for it. Your church is going to be better for it. You're probably going to get better musicians.
Yeah.
Um, but go to lunch with those people. Go to
Yeah.
dinner with them. Like, get to know them. Like, share your story. Like, be their friend. Maybe uh yeah, like be their pastor, but be their friend first,
Hmm.
who genuinely cares. I feel like I was probably better at that than anything else in my job. Like, and I think there was a couple of key people that were so attractive to everyone else. And I think they felt like our church was a safe place that honestly, I kind of, cowboy terms, I left the corral doors open and I was like, you can you can feel the freedom to like to go in and to come out. Like,
Hmm.
I'm it, but there was a mutual trust and a friendship there. Um and so I'm in slash questionable heart. I don't know exactly. I think I get kind of what that means, but if someone's just a diva and they're really hard to be around, I would take them to coffee and say, "Hey, this is the vibe you put off. I don't know if you're aware of this." And if they're like, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea," then boom, problem solved. But if someone's not willing to shift and they're becoming an issue, if they're super late all the time, they're unprepared, like I'd like those people are culture killers, and that's not fair to the people who are working really hard and preparing. And I'd be like, if it's something like that, I'd be like, I love you, buddy. Here's what it's like on the other side of you. If you're not willing to change, have we'll try this again another time.
Yep. That's good. What tips do you have for building community in the team?
Um, I'm a sucker. I'm a sucker for midweek rehearsals. I love them. I love them forever. I think we would have our rehearsals at 7 o'clock, and I would have people show up at 5 o'clock just to hang out, just to set up, talk about gear. Sometimes we just jam. Like I, I miss more than anything. I miss midweek rehearsals. Like I'm not in this
Mm,
season leading every Sunday like I was. And the thing I missed the most was midweek rehearsals because we came together as ordinary, common people, and we put our powers together, and we worked with our craft, and we sculpted and we shaped a thing on Wednesday nights, and then on Sundays we would come and kind of lay it before our church and before the Lord as an offering. And then to get to see what God does with that, it's like there's nothing better than building something with your friends and getting to see God use it. And so, our rehearsals for a while got to be real nuts and bolts, like let's figure out how to play the song. And then they got to a spot where everybody was like, the songs were the afterthought. And it's like, let's worship, like let's have fun. Let's find the magic moments where, oh man, this is going to be a moment on Sunday, like this transition or this thing.
mhm.
And we were able to go further and take more risks in rehearsal than we maybe would on a Sunday. And therefore on Sunday, like you felt it. And so that was huge for us. We would do like team nights where we just like get together and like, it depends on where you are. Like you could do like a training, like practical trainings, or you could not. You could just like get buffalo wings and play board games or play cornhole. I think people just want to have fun. And
Yeah.
I think there's seasons where maybe the fall, like you choose to like, okay, we're going to really dive into offering development for our people. And then in the summer, we're just going to party. We're going to have monthly team nights in my backyard, and I'm going to buy hot dogs, and it's just going to be a fun party where we're all together and we're not talking about music. Or if we do, it's like geeking out about something.
Right. Right. I love
Yeah.
that. I think that that's one of your superpowers specifically. I've watched you lead worship. I've been in the room when you're doing rehearsals, and I think that one of your superpowers is making people just feel like they're really a part of a community, that they're loved, that they have a friend, that they have someone to laugh at and with. And I think that's a really special gift that you have,
Mm.
that you do really
Mm.
well,
Well, thank
that I
you.
think all worship leaders could really learn from and hopefully adapt some of those things. So I
Mm.
think we would be missing something big too if we didn't talk about what you're doing now. And maybe just share with us, I know you live in Nashville now. Share with us just about what's happening in your world. What's next? Are you working on new music? I know you're on a tour, or maybe you just got off a tour, I'm not sure. Just give us the idea of what's happening in Patrick Mayberry music world.
Yeah, man. All kinds of fun stuff. Like I feel like the Lord's just been so crazy. Like and I need to say all this. I feel like you get this because you've known me, but I say all this to maybe anyone who's watching. I am literally the most normal of normal, like below normal. Like I don't understand. Like I can remember years ago when I would, see someone or watch someone who I looked up to, and I'm just like, man, they are so amazing. And how did they do that? But so anything that I'm about to say, like, I have to preface it with, like, it is not off limits to anyone. Like, I'm so stupidly average. But it's been cool to see just I've worked really hard, and I've tried to be faithful and kind and nice and love people, and it's been really cool to see God open doors. Yeah, I've been doing a bunch of music, put out a thing last summer. Um, I've gotten to write for a lot of other people. My wife and I got to go be guests at the Passion conferences last year because I got to write a bunch of songs for their record, and gotten to like do some stuff with them, which has been really fun. And uh, a lot of other like fun churches and artists that I've been getting to like partner
Yeah.
with. And I'm actually out on my very first tour ever. I never toured, never stepped foot on a tour bus until like 3 weeks ago. But I'm out right now on this acoustic tour with Corey Asbury, which has been really fun. And I'm playing some songs acoustic, and then he's playing some songs acoustic, and it's been really sweet to kind of go around the country and like just interact with people who are really doing good work in the church, and
Yeah.
like the church is like just thriving, and it's been really fun to connect with people. And then I'm going on another tour in June with a full band, which I'm so excited about. This will be another first for me. And um, it's with David Crowder, who I've like looked up to for a long time. And it's going to be bananas, man. And so I have I have no idea what's happening after that. I'm still super connected and doing a lot of work with Soul City, and um, I'm kind of in a different role there, where I'm more overseeing like production and songwriting. And
Mhm.
so we've gotten to do a lot of songwriting retreats, and that's been a whole new world of like moving from, how do you get people to join your worship band, and it's like, well, then how do you get people to write songs and
Yeah.
unleash that? And that's been a whole new thing. And we've written a lot of really cool songs this year, and we're going to be kind of ramping up to do some sort of capturing kind of this just the soundtrack of Soul City. And
Yeah.
I say that like that, like we're not doing a record. Like we want to
Right.
capture the sound of like the expression that is happening through the Spirit in our church. And so,
Yeah.
and it might just be a gift for our church, but I think other people would resonate with it.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm excited about that, and that's just rocking and rolling, man.
That's awesome, man. I'm very
Yeah.
happy for you. It's cool to watch just your music spread across everywhere and see what you're doing on tour. And it's awesome, man. I'm very happy for you. That is time, but I want to say, everybody, make sure you go listen to Patrick's music if you have not done that. And Patrick, thanks for just taking the time, man, to talk about this very practical worship leading. This is like the in the ditches kind of work,
That's the
And I'm,
real work, man. The in the ditches is the
yeah,
that's the real work. Anybody can get on stage with an awesome band
yeah,
and and put on a show. Like
right, right,
this is the real work. This is the faithful work. This is the in the field when God plucks you out of obscurity. Like
right,
this is that kind of work. So I
yeah.
commend anyone who's in this work.
Thanks, man. Thanks for joining us for this interview, and hopefully I'll see you soon.
Woo!
See you, man. Thanks.
Bye.
All right. Thank you, Patrick, for a great interview, talking very practical on something that worship leaders are probably spending a lot of their time on Tuesday through Friday, and that's actually building a band, scheduling people, finding new musicians, auditions. We talked about all of that. So, what's one thing that you walked away from this interview with? I want you to type it down in the chats wherever you're watching it from: Facebook, YouTube, Snap, TikTok, wherever you are. Write down what's one thing you're going to walk away from this conversation with. And then, of course, if you have not done so, make sure you go listen to Patrick's music on Spotify, Apple Music. We also have all of his tracks at Loop Community. So if you want those, check them out. And make sure you hit subscribe and like so you're up to date for future Loop Live interviews. As always, great to see you. Thanks for being a part of the community.